It was a cold Thursday afternoon when I stopped my old car in front of City General Hospital. My phone buzzed, a new ride request. Another short trip, maybe $10 at most. I'd been driving 12 hours straight, my back aching, my knees stiff, my stomach empty. I was 73, but survival doesn't care about age. Through the hospital's glass doors, an old man in a perfectly pressed gray suit appeared. His silver cane gleamed beneath the streetlights. He moved with the precision of someone who once commanded rooms, but his eyes looked haunted. I stepped out, opened the back door, and said softly, "Need a hand, sir?" The moment our eyes met, his entire body froze. His expression collapsed from control into something raw: shock, disbelief, grief. He gripped his cane as if it were the only thing keeping him upright. Your name," he stammered. "Is it Vance? Are you Leopold Vance?" I blinked, confused. "Yes, sir. That's me." The old man's lips quivered, and tears began to stream down his wrinkled cheeks. Not polite tears, the kind that come from the depths of a soul carrying something unbearable. He covered his face with trembling hands and whispered, "I've been looking for your family for 60 years. My chest tightened. "I'm sorry, you must be mistaken." He shook his head violently. "No, not mistaken. I knew your father. He saved my life." The city around us seemed to fade, the honking cars, the hospital noise, the people rushing past. For a few seconds, there was only that man and his tears. Something inside me stirred, an ache I hadn't felt since the day I buried my wife 6 months earlier. He lowered his hands, still shaking, and said, "Please, drive me to my office. There's something I've been waiting to show your family for decades. Something that belongs to you." I hesitated. It could have been a scam. But there was no deception in his voice, only truth soaked in guilt. Against every logical thought, I nodded. "All right, sir. Let's go." As he settled in, I noticed the gold initials engraved on his cane. A.T. Whoever he was, he carried the kind of wealth that could buy half the city. During the drive, he said nothing. He just stared out the window, silent tears glistening under the passing lights. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter with every minute. When we reached downtown, he instructed me to stop before a towering glass building that looked like it belonged to another world. Thorn Industries, the sign read in silver letters. He turned to me and whispered, "Please, come inside. What's waiting upstairs will change everything you believe about your father and about yourself." I didn't know it then, but the next hour would unravel a secret buried for 6 decades, and resurrect a legacy that would rewrite my life forever. The elevator ride felt endless. Every second echoed with the old man's labored breathing. He stood beside me, gripping his antique cane, his watery eyes fixed on the glowing floor numbers as if counting down to a confession he'd been carrying for a lifetime. When the doors finally opened, I followed him into a vast office that smelled of leather, wood polish, and time. Panoramic windows revealed the whole city, sparkling under the gray clouds like a field of diamonds. The man turned to me with a faint, trembling smile. "My name," he said, pausing as though the words themselves hurt to say, "is Alfred Thorn. I'm the founder of Thorn Industries. But before I was anyone, your father saved me." My throat went dry. "You knew my father?" He nodded, walking slowly toward a painting that covered an entire section of the wall. A seascape in deep blues and silvers. Without another word, he gripped the frame and slid it aside. Behind it was an old safe, the kind with a heavy metal dial and rust along the edges, untouched for decades. Alfred glanced at me, his expression torn between fear and relief. "This has waited 60 years, Leopold. 60 years of sleepless nights, wondering if I'd ever find your family again." My mind spun. But what could possibly be in there? He didn't answer. Instead, he began to turn the dial with slow, deliberate movements. Left, right, left. The sound of metal clicking filled the room like a heartbeat. Finally, there was a soft metallic thud. The safe door creaked open. Inside was a thick layer of dust, and an old leather folder, frayed at the corners, its brown surface faded to near gray. Alfred lifted it with trembling hands, as though holding something sacred. He placed the folder on the desk and motioned for me to come closer. My feet felt like stone, but I moved. He untied the string and opened it. Inside lay yellow documents, photographs, and what looked like stock certificates printed on ancient paper. "This," he said softly, "is the debt I never repaid. The promise your father never claimed." I leaned in and saw a photograph. Two young men standing before a brick building. One of them unmistakably Alfred, 50 years younger, and the other, my father. I froze. My chest constricted. The man in the photo had my same eyes, my same jawline, the same stubborn half-smile. Alfred's voice cracked. "Your father, Hector Vance, was the only man who ever saved me from ruin. I owed him everything, and I never got to thank him." I swallowed hard, my voice barely audible. "Saved you? How?" Alfred sank into his chair, the years in his shoulders suddenly visible. "In 1965, I was a desperate young man with a collapsing company. No bank would help me. No one believed in me. And then, at a tiny bar near my factory, your father appeared. A mechanic. Covered in grease. Quiet, but honest. He stared at the ceiling as if replaying the scene. He listened to me ramble about debts and failure. Then he said something I'll never forget. Everyone deserves one last chance. 2 days later, he gave me his life savings, $30,000. That was everything he had. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My father, a simple mechanic, gave away all his savings to a stranger? Alfred nodded, tears gathering in his eyes. He trusted me with his future. And because of that, I built this. He gestured toward the empire outside the window. But he disappeared before I could repay him. I searched for him for 60 years. Every day I asked myself why he never came back. Maybe he didn't care about the money. Maybe he just cared about keeping his word. I stared at the documents in front of me, the signature Hector Vance written in neat, confident ink. And below it a single line. 30% ownership of Thorne Textiles, granted in good faith to Mr. Hector Vance. The letters blurred as tears filled my eyes. Alfred's hand rested gently on my shoulder. That 30% has grown, Leopold. It's worth more than you can imagine. What's in that folder will change everything you thought you knew about your father and yourself. My knees weakened. I sank into the chair opposite him, unable to speak. I didn't yet know it, but that old safe had just opened the door to a fortune and a truth that would turn my broken life into something extraordinary. The sound of my heartbeat drowned out everything else. I could barely hear the ticking clock on the wall or the hum of the city 20 floors below. Alfred slid the folder toward me, his hands trembling as though the paper might vanish if he let go. "Look closely, Leopold," he whispered. "What your father left behind was never claimed. Until now." I reached out, my fingers brushing over the brittle edges of the old documents. The pages smelled of time, of forgotten promises and dust-covered history. There were official seals, accountant stamps, letters signed in neat cursive from the 1960s. And then I saw it. 30% ownership, Thorne Textiles Incorporated. I froze. My mind refused to process what those words meant. Alfred opened another sheet, newer, printed in crisp ink. "This," he said, "is their current market value." The number written at the bottom nearly stopped my heart. $32,047,880. $32 million. I blinked. Twice. The air left my lungs like someone had punched me. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't speak. Couldn't even think. I had been living in a damp, roach-infested room for $300 a month, eating canned beans and stale bread. I had been kicked out by my own sons. I had begged for extra rides just to survive. And now, right here in my trembling hands, was enough money to change not only my life, but generations of my family forever. My lips parted, but no words came out. Alfred didn't interrupt. He simply watched, letting me drown in disbelief. Finally, I managed to whisper, "32 million?" He nodded once. "That's the total value today. But for me, Leopold, this isn't about money. It's about a promise. One your father trusted me to keep." I sank into the chair, the document shaking in my hand. He never told me. He never told anyone. Alfred's voice softened. He was that kind of man. Quiet. Pure. He gave without expecting. Helped without asking. And that, my boy, is why I've carried this debt for 60 years. Because people like your father, they don't just save companies. They save souls. His words hit me harder than any number could. For a moment, I didn't see the luxurious office, the glittering skyline, or the million-dollar furniture. I saw my father's hands, grease-stained, scarred, trembling after long hours at the garage. I saw him pouring his entire savings into the hands of a stranger, not because he had to, but because it was right. Tears welled up in my eyes. I tried to hide them, but Alfred saw. He rose slowly, walking around the desk, and placed his frail hand on my shoulder. Your father gave me my life, he said, voice breaking. Let me give back what always belonged to you. The room went silent. The city outside seemed to disappear. Only our breathing filled the space between us. His soft and uneven, mine heavy and choked. Alfred took a deep breath, straightened his back, and spoke again, steady now. I'll have my lawyers start the process immediately. The shares, the dividends, the accumulated value, all will be transferred to your name. You'll never have to work another day, Leopold. My mind spun. I didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or collapse. I thought of my wife, Patrice, who died just months earlier. I wished she could have seen this moment, after all the years of struggle, pain, and quiet despair. I whispered half to myself, she would have been so proud. Alfred smiled gently. I believe she's watching, my friend, just as your father is. And I think both of them are finally at peace. A single tear rolled down my cheek and fell onto the contract. The ink bled slightly, as if sealing the past and present together. I looked up at him and said in a trembling voice, Mr. Thorne, I don't know what to say. He shook his head. Don't say anything. Just promise me one thing. When life blesses you this way, make sure you use it to bless others. At that moment, I didn't fully understand how deep those words were. But soon I would. Because this wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of the most emotional, unpredictable chapter of my life. The next morning, sunlight crept through the narrow blinds of my tiny rented room. The air smelled of mold and dust, the same way it had for months. But this morning felt different. Something inside me had shifted. I sat on the edge of my creaking bed, clutching the photograph Alfred had given me. My father, young and smiling, standing beside him in front of that old factory. The paper felt alive, like it was breathing with me. I whispered, You did this, Dad. You somehow reached through time to save me. At 9 o'clock sharp, my phone buzzed. It was Stephen, Alfred's lawyer. His tone was calm, professional, but underneath it I heard warmth. Good morning, Mr. Vance. Mr. Thorne asked me to inform you that an advance of $50,000 has been deposited into your account this morning. For a moment I thought I had misheard him. 50,000? I repeated. Yes, sir, Stephen confirmed. It's just to cover immediate needs while the transfer of your father's shares is finalized. Please come to the office at 3 o'clock. We'll begin all formal documentation then. The call ended. My hands were trembling. I opened my banking app, something I hadn't dared to check in weeks because the balance always mocked me with poverty. But this time, when the screen loaded, my breath caught. $50,215.24. For several seconds, I couldn't move. I refreshed the app 3 times just to make sure it wasn't some cruel glitch. It wasn't. The money was there. Waiting for me. I felt something inside my chest crack open. Not excitement, not greed, relief. The kind of relief you only feel after drowning for months and finally breaking the surface to gasp for air. I got dressed and walked to the nearest bank, the same one where the tellers used to look at me like a tired old man wasting their time. When I asked to check my balance, the clerk's eyes widened. Her polite smile turned genuine. Would you like to make a withdrawal, Mr. Vance? I nodded faintly. Just 1,000. Cash. She handed me 10 crisp $100 bills. My hands shook as I held them. They felt heavier than gold. Outside, the city looked different. The same streets that once mocked my misery now shimmered with new color. I saw people rushing to work, children laughing at bus stops, couples holding coffee cups. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel invisible. I walked into a small restaurant I'd passed 100 times but never entered because I couldn't afford even the smell of it. The waiter smiled. "Table for one?" "Yes," I said proudly. "For one." I ordered a full breakfast, eggs, toast, bacon, orange juice, and real coffee. When the food arrived, I stared at it for a long moment before taking the first bite. Warm butter melted on my tongue, and I felt tears rising. It wasn't the food, it was the dignity it represented. After the meal, I stopped at a clothing store. I bought a gray dress shirt, black trousers, and polished shoes. Nothing fancy, just clean, new, decent. For the first time in months, I looked at myself in a mirror and didn't see a broken man. I saw someone coming back to life. That afternoon, I walked into Steven's downtown office. The smell of fresh coffee, the click of heels on marble floors, everything felt unreal. Steven greeted me with a firm handshake and said, "Welcome, Mr. Vance. Let's begin restoring what's rightfully yours." I sat down, the city skyline glowing behind him. Paperwork filled the table, legal forms, affidavits, documents for DNA verification, proof of identity. Each signature I placed was like closing a wound I had carried for years. By the time I left that office, the sun was setting over the skyscrapers, painting the sky in gold and crimson. I looked up and whispered, "Dad, you kept your promise. Now it's my turn to keep mine." I didn't know it yet, but this was just the beginning of the storm. The money would test not just my gratitude, but my soul. Days turned into weeks, and each sunrise felt like a second chance. I was still the same man, 73, gray-haired, with tired bones, but life had handed me something I'd thought I'd lost forever: dignity. The $50,000 Alfred gave me was only the beginning. Steven called me every few days with updates about the full transfer. DNA verification confirmed I was Hector Vance's biological son, and legal documentation was almost complete. Within 2 weeks, the inheritance would be fully mine. But even before the millions arrived, my life began to bloom. I left that miserable, damp room, the one with the flickering light and the broken mattress, and rented a small, clean apartment uptown. A real bed, hot water, a kitchen that didn't smell like someone else's cigarettes. I cooked my own food, listened to old jazz, and for the first time in months, slept through the night. I bought a modest car, nothing extravagant, just something that started on the first try. I stopped counting pennies. I stopped walking with my head down. The mirror showed a man who had survived hell and somehow stepped out reborn. But peace never stays long. It always tests if you've truly learned. One afternoon, my phone rang. The name on the screen made my stomach twist. Earl, my younger son. It had been 4 months since his last call, the same day he and his brother kicked me out of the house I'd built with my own hands. "Dad," his voice cracked on the other end, pretending to sound casual, "how are you?" I stayed silent for a moment, measuring every beat of my heart. "I'm fine, Earl. How about you?" He hesitated. "Moses and I were talking. Maybe we were too harsh before. We wanted to see you. Maybe have dinner." My grip on the phone tightened. I wanted to believe him, to believe my sons had realized what they'd done. But somewhere inside, a quiet voice whispered, "Be careful. People remember you when they think you're useful again." Still I agreed. "Dinner sounds fine." We met at a small restaurant downtown, the same one we used to go to when Patrice, my late wife, was still alive. When they walked in, my heart clenched. They looked older but not wiser. Their eyes flickered with something I couldn't name yet: guilt, maybe, or calculation. We talked about small things first: the weather, traffic, work. Then Moses leaned forward, clearing his throat. "Dad, we know things were hard after Mom passed. Maybe we didn't handle things right. But we want to help now. You shouldn't live alone. You can stay in Earl's service room. $50 a month rent, we'll make it comfortable." Earl nodded eagerly. "Yeah, you can even help out a little. Maybe wash the car, do some yard work, light stuff. It'll make you feel useful again." Their words hung in the air like poison wrapped in kindness. I stared at them both, my own sons, offering me a place to live as if I were a servant, not their father. I smiled faintly. "That's generous of you," I said quietly, "but I've already found a decent place." Moses frowned. "How? On your social security check?" I looked at both of them. Let's just say, life took a turn. They exchanged glances, suspicion flickering behind their eyes. "Dad," Earl said with a forced laugh, "you didn't win the lottery, did you?" I didn't laugh. "No," I said softly. "But I did find something your grandfather left behind, something that changed everything." I told them about Alfred Thorne, about the company, about the $30,000 investment in 1965, about the $32 million fortune that had waited in silence for 60 years. The words hit the table like thunder. Their faces went pale. Moses's jaw dropped. Earl blinked twice, then forced a smile. "You're serious?" "Completely," I said. "The lawyers are finalizing everything next week." For a few seconds, there was silence, then excitement. They began talking over each other, about family investments, joint accounts, houses, vacations. Their eyes sparkled, not with love, but greed. I sat back watching them. I didn't feel anger. Just a deep sadness, the kind that comes when you finally understand people's true hearts. The same sons who had thrown me out like a burden now spoke as if we were a team again. But this time, I wasn't the same man they'd abandoned. This time I had power. The silence after my revelation felt heavy enough to crush the air around us. For a few long seconds, neither of my sons spoke. The restaurant's faint music and clinking plates faded into background noise. All I could hear was my own heartbeat, slow and steady, like a clock ticking toward the truth. Then Moses leaned forward, voice trembling with forced excitement. "Dad, that's incredible. 32 million? We should celebrate. We can figure out how to invest it, together, as a family." Earl nodded quickly, words tumbling from his mouth. "Yeah. We can help you manage everything, make sure you're taken care of. You don't have to worry about a thing." I stared at them, watching their eyes dart between each other, glowing, greedy, hungry. And suddenly I understood. This wasn't love. This wasn't reunion. It was opportunity. I took a slow sip of water, letting their words echo until they ran out of things to say. Then, calmly, I placed my glass down and said, "Do you both remember what you said to me 4 months ago? When I asked where I was supposed to go after you sold my house?" Moses looked away. Earl's smile faltered. "You said I should find a cheap room," I continued. "That you had your own families, your own debts, your own lives. You didn't even look at me when you said it." I could feel my voice shaking, not with anger, but with something deeper. "You threw me out of the home your mother and I built with our hands. The same hands that raised you. And you didn't call. Not once. Not to check if I was alive, or starving, or sleeping under a bridge." Moses shifted uncomfortably. "Dad, we were—" "Don't," I interrupted, my tone sharp but quiet. "You were grown men. You knew exactly what you were doing." Earl tried to force a tear. "We made mistakes, Dad. But we love you. We can fix this." I shook my head slowly. Love doesn't come back just because there's money involved. Love stays when there's nothing left to take. Their faces hardened. The masks of guilt melted away, replaced by anger. Moses slammed his palm on the table, rattling the silverware. "So what, Dad? You think you can cut us out? We're your sons. We deserve a part of that money." I looked at him steadily. "No, you don't deserve it. Not because you're not my blood, but because you already had my love, my time, my years. And when I needed yours, you turned away." The restaurant had gone quiet around us. Even the waiter froze mid-step, pretending not to listen but unable to look away. Earl leaned forward, voice low and desperate. "Dad, please. You can't leave us with nothing." I exhaled slowly. "You left me with nothing first." The words hit harder than a slap. Moses looked away, jaw tight, anger flickering in his eyes. I leaned back and continued softly, almost like I was speaking to ghosts. "Do you know what your grandfather did 60 years ago? He gave away everything he owned, not for family, not for profit, but because he believed in helping a stranger. He never asked for anything back. That's the blood that runs in our veins. That's the name you carry, Thunce. But you forgot what it means. Neither of them spoke. I stood, placing $100 bill on the table to cover my meal. I forgive you, I said finally, but forgiveness doesn't mean I owe you. If one day you learn what your grandfather truly left us, not money, but honor, then maybe we can talk again. Till then, I'll pray you find your own worth. I turned and walked out. Behind me, I heard Earl's voice crack, calling, Dad, but I didn't stop. Outside, the cold air hit my face like truth. For the first time in years, I felt light, free from their expectations, free from the past. That night, I sat on my balcony with a cup of coffee, watching the city lights shimmer like tiny stars. I thought of Alfred, thought of my father, and I realized money hadn't saved me. Character had. And that was something no one could ever take away again. 3 days after that dinner, I received a call from Stephen. His tone was different, gentle, heavy. Mr. Vance, he said softly, I'm sorry to tell you, Alfred Thorne passed away this morning. Peacefully at home. Surrounded by family. For a moment, I couldn't speak. I sat in silence, gripping the phone until my knuckles whitened. Stephen continued, he asked me to tell you something, that he could finally rest knowing he kept his word to Hector Vance. I closed my eyes. The old man had fulfilled a promise that most people would have forgotten long ago. He'd carried that debt like a cross on his back, and now he was free. When I hung up, tears blurred the city skyline outside my window. I whispered, thank you, Alfred. You didn't just pay a debt, you gave me my father back. A week later, I stood in Stephen's office once more. The air was different now, quiet, ceremonial. A public notary sat at the polished table, documents neatly stacked before me. Stephen looked up and smiled. It's done, Mr. Vance. The shares are officially yours. 30% ownership of Thorne Textiles Incorporated. You're now one of the major shareholders. I stared at the papers, my name printed in crisp black ink, Leopold Vance, owner. It didn't feel real. A month ago, I'd been counting coins for bread. Now, my father's name echoed through one of the largest companies in the country. But instead of joy, I felt something else, responsibility. This fortune wasn't just money. It was a message sent through time, a reminder that integrity outlives wealth. When I left the building, I didn't go to a car dealership or a luxury store. I went to a small park near the old neighborhood where my father once worked. Children were playing, chasing pigeons. A young man was fixing a bicycle under the shade of an elm tree. His hands were black with grease, his clothes torn, but there was honesty in his eyes, the same kind of honesty my father had. I walked over and handed him my card. If you ever need a job, I said, call this number. He blinked, surprised. What kind of job, sir? The kind that rewards hard work, I smiled. And keeps its promises. As I walked away, I felt my father's presence again, quiet, steady, proud. I knew he would have done the same. That evening, I sat on my balcony as the city lights flickered below like stars fallen to earth. I took the old photograph from my pocket, the one of my father and Alfred, young and fearless, standing shoulder to shoulder. I placed it beside my coffee mug and whispered, Dad, I finally understand. You weren't poor. You were rich in the only currency that matters, character. The night air was cool. For the first time in a long while, my heart was light. Money had changed my circumstances, but kindness had changed my soul. I looked into the camera of my phone and began recording, not as a man who had found fortune, but as a son who had found meaning. My father once said, I began, integrity is wealth that never loses value. If this story found you in a moment of struggle, remember, sometimes the reward doesn't come from the world. It comes from the legacy you carry within you. Be kind. Keep your word. Help someone even when no one is watching. Because one day, that kindness might travel decades and find its way back to you. I smiled gently into the lens. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs hope today. And don't forget, Subscribe for more real stories that remind us that goodness still exists. I turned off the camera. Somewhere above, I imagined Alfred and my father smiling. Two men who had changed each other's lives, and, through me, perhaps changed a few more. This final part leaves viewers inspired, ending on hope, gratitude, and integrity, while naturally leading into your outro. Like, share, subscribe, for stories that restore faith in humanity.